The wind howled outside as heavy rain hit the roof of the small wooden house. The old solar lamps flickered, casting dim light over the quiet living room. John, a human farmer living on the edge of Colony 6, sat near the fire with a cup of lukewarm tea. His dog, Rex, lay at his feet, ears twitching at every sound outside. The storm was strong that night, and no one should have been out in it. Suddenly, there was a knock. It was soft at first, almost unsure. Then it came again. Louder, more desperate. John stood up, heart beating faster. Visitors were rare out here, especially at night, especially in this kind of weather. He opened the door slowly, hand near his. Old plasma rifle mounted beside the frame. What he saw made him freeze. Standing there, soaked to the bone, was an alien woman, tall and thin, with deep violet skin and glowing yellow eyes. In her arms she held two small children, both wrapped in rags and shivering from cold. Their tiny bodies shook, and their eyes looked dull from hunger. The woman opened her mouth and spoke in broken English. "Please, help us," she said softly, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. John looked at them, then at the dark forest behind her. There was no transport, no light, no sign of anyone else. She wasn't just lost, she was running from something. He moved aside without speaking, motioning for her to enter. The woman stepped in slowly, careful, as if expecting a trap. The children clung to her legs as she sat down near the fire. John handed her a towel and then tossed another to the kids. He didn't ask questions, not yet. Rex walked over and sniffed the newcomers, then laid down again, tail wagging slightly. John saw the way the alien woman watched his dog, eyes wide. "You've never seen one?" he asked, voice low. She shook her head, not alive. She replied, making his chest tighten. He moved to the kitchen and poured warm soup into 3 small bowls. He set them on the floor, and the kids rushed forward like they hadn't eaten. In days, the woman tried to stop them from eating too fast, but she was clearly starving too. John sat back down and waited, watching the fire crackle and the water drip from their clothes. He didn't know their names, but something in his gut told him they weren't just strangers, they were in real danger. After a while, the woman finally looked up. "I am Kalia," she said slowly. "These are my younglings, Lero and Fen." John nodded. "I'm John," he said. "This is Rex." Kalia looked at the dog and smiled weakly. "You are?" "Kind," she whispered. John didn't answer, but he noticed the marks on her wrists. Thin lines, like they had been tied tightly with metal cord. The children had bruises too. Old ones, faded but still visible. Who would hurt a woman and her? Children like that? And why? "You from the city side?" he asked carefully. She hesitated, then shook her head. "No. I escaped from Lord Vern's estate." John sat up straighter. The warlord Kalia nodded slowly. "He cast me out. Said I was spoiled." Her voice broke at the word. "My mate left me, and now they hunt me for leaving." John felt anger rising in his chest. He had heard stories of the alien nobles, how they treated women like property. But this? Chasing down a mother and her children in a storm. That was cruel, even by alien standards. He looked at her again, really looked, and saw not just a scared mother, but a strong one who had risked everything to save her younglings. "You're safe here," he said firmly. "No one's gonna hurt you." Kalia's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them. "You don't know what they'll do," she whispered. "They'll come for me." For us, John stood up and went to the door, locking it tightly. "Let them come," he said. "They'll find out humans don't give up so easy." The fire cracked louder now, casting shadows on the walls. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the house, it was quiet, safe. For now, Kalia leaned back, holding her children close, their breathing finally steady. John sat beside them, staring into the flames, wondering what he had just stepped into. But deep down, something told him this was just the beginning. John didn't sleep that night. He sat in his chair by the fire, watching the shadows dance across the wooden floor. The alien woman and her 2 children had fallen asleep on a blanket, curled up together like a small, trembling bundle. Kalia's breathing was uneven at first, but over time it calmed, even in rest. Her arms never let go of the children. He looked at the scars on her wrists again. Not fresh, but not old either. They told a story she hadn't fully spoken yet, and John wasn't the kind of man to ask a woman to relive pain too soon. Still, his mind kept asking one question: why come here? To his lonely house on the edge of nowhere. In the morning, the storm had stopped. Gray clouds floated low in the sky, and everything outside was wet and quiet. John started his day like always, moving slowly so he wouldn't wake them. He cooked breakfast: some eggs, root mash, and warm tea. As the smell filled the room, the smallest child stirred first. The boy sat up, rubbing his eyes, blinking at the new world around him. John offered a gentle smile and handed him a small plate. The boy hesitated, looked to his mother, then took it and whispered something in his alien tongue. John couldn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. It was thanks shy, but real. Callie awoke soon after, and the girl followed. They ate slowly this time, as if not afraid it would be taken away. John didn't speak much, but when Kalia met his eyes, she seemed to know he had questions. She waited until the children stepped outside to explore the edge of the field. Then, with her hands folded in her lap, she spoke, in our kind. Women belong to the house of their mate, she said quietly. John listened closely, never interrupting. If the mate casts her out, she is seen as used, she continued, her voice tight. No one helps her, no one takes her in. And her children are marked too. She looked down, shame filling her glowing eyes. He left you? John asked, trying to keep the anger out of his voice. Kalia nodded. He wanted a new female, younger. From a noble line, he said I was too slow to give him strong sons. John clenched his fists under the table. Then he told the guards to remove us. Kalia's hands trembled, but she didn't cry. I begged them to let me take food for the children, she said. They laughed. I had nothing. Number credits, no family. She looked at John, her voice shaking. Then, someone whispered that humans sometimes help the weak. John blinked, surprised. Someone sent you here. She nodded. A traitor, half human, half alien. He told me about you, about a human farmer who once fixed a broken wing for a wild bird instead of killing it. John scratched his beard and chuckled dryly. Didn't know that made me famous? To me, it did, she whispered. They sat in silence, broken only by the happy squeals of children outside. Then Kalia stood and walked toward the window. Watching her younglings, they're smiling, she said with wonder. They haven't smiled in months. John felt something heavy shift inside his chest. He walked over and stood beside her. I've got space in the shed, he said. If you want to stay, Kalia turned to him slowly. We don't want to be trouble. John shook his head. You're not, he said. Trouble is letting people like your ex run free. She looked at him for a long moment, then spoke. Softly, in my culture, when someone gives food and protection, it means bonding. John raised an eyebrow. Marriage? Kalia nodded once, her cheeks coloring faintly. I know it's not your way, but to the children. You've already become their mate, father. John didn't know what to say. He wasn't ready to be anyone's husband, and definitely not a father overnight. But when he looked out the window and saw those 2 alien kids chasing butterflies in his field, something in him melted. He had lived alone for too long. Maybe this wasn't a mistake. Kalia stepped back. Sensing his hesitation, you don't need to accept it, she said, voice barely above a whisper. But the younglings. They already have. John turned to her and nodded slowly. We'll figure it out. He said, one day at a time, outside, the sun began to break through the clouds inside. A small family broken, but healing started their first quiet. Mourning together, none of them knew what tomorrow would bring. But today, they had peace, and that was enough. The days passed slowly but gently. Kalia and her children helped around the farm. Learning human tools and human ways, she didn't complain, not even once. And her hands, though small and delicate, were strong and steady. She cleaned, she cooked, and she even learned to patch old wires under John's instruction. Lero and Fen, the children, followed John around like shadows. They asked questions in their alien tongue, and Kalia translated when she could. Sometimes they just watched. Him work, eyes full of wonder. One evening, she poured water into the animal troughs. The girl, Fen, giggled and called him something strange in her language. Kalia looked up sharply, then sighed. She called you Turthal, she said. Cheeks turning faintly violet, John raised an eyebrow. That means something? Kalia hesitated, brushing dust off her hands. In your words. Bonded male or mate father, she said softly. John blinked, caught off guard. He had no idea they already saw him that way. But I'm not their father, he said, more to himself than her. Kalia nodded slowly. I told them. But they say you are kind. You feed them, protect them, laugh with them, two younglings. That's what a father is. John didn't respond right away. He watched Lero trying to stack crates taller than himself and grinned. He wasn't used. To this, his days used to be silent, only broken by the wind or the occasional call from distant traders. Now, there was laughter. Music from Kalia, soft humming, and the scent of warm food every evening. It was unfamiliar, but it wasn't bad. It felt like something worth holding on to that night after the children had gone to sleep. John stood by the door, staring at the stars. Kalia approached slowly, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. The children like it here, she said, her voice calm. John nodded. It's quiet. They need that. She turned to look at him, her eyes glowing faintly under the moonlight. I have a question, she said, surprising him. If I stayed here forever, what would that mean to you? John looked at her, unsure how to answer. He wasn't a man of big words or promises, but when he looked at her, standing in his doorway, not as an alien, but as a mother trying to survive, he knew one thing. I wouldn't mind, he said finally. This place. It's better with you all here, she smiled, and for the first time since they met. It wasn't a guarded smile, it was soft and full of hope. Then she stepped closer, just enough to whisper. In my people's law, a shared home and meal means we are bound. John stared at her, heartbeat rising. I didn't mean to marry you by accident, he said, with a nervous chuckle. Kalia tilted her head. Would it be so bad? He didn't answer, but his silence spoke louder than any words. She took his hand gently, fingers cold but steady. Then let us be what they already believe we are. The wind blew softly across the field, and two shadows stood side by side under the moon. No vows, no rings, no grand ceremony, just a quiet understanding. Later that night, Lero woke up from a bad dream and ran to John's bed. He didn't say a word, just curled up beside him and fell asleep again. John didn't move him, didn't send him back, just placed an arm around the child without thinking. Kalia stood in the doorway, watching silently. Her heart ached, but not from fear this time, from something gentle. Something she had almost forgotten existed. Safety, belonging, but beyond the quiet hills. In the shadows of the forest, someone was watching. A small drone hovered silently, its lens glowing red as it recorded the family inside. It sent a signal back to someone far away. someone who didn't forget what Kalia had taken and didn't forgive her for running. John noticed it first when Rex began growling at the tree line. The dog never growled without reason. It was morning, and the sky was clear. The field still damp from last night's dew, Kalia stood near the clothesline, hanging blankets with Fen. John stepped outside and followed Rex's gaze toward the forest. Nothing moved, no wind, no sound, just silence, too silent. He narrowed his eyes and walked out slowly, scanning the edge of the tall grass. Then he saw it a small shimmer, like heat rising off metal, a cloaked drone. His gut twisted. He didn't wait. He pulled out his old cum scanner and tracked the signal. It was active, not local, and definitely not friendly. Someone had found them. Kalia saw his expression and froze. She knew, even before he said a word. "Is it them?" she asked, voice trembling. John nodded. "A scout drone. Someone's watching." She grabbed her children and pulled them close, her eyes wide with fear. He disabled the drone with a blast from his old rifle. But the damage was done. Its signal was already sent. They had little time, maybe a day, maybe hours. John paced the room as Kalia held her younglings close. She didn't cry, but her hands shook as she whispered to them in her native tongue. "I knew this would happen," she said softly. "They don't let things go." John didn't ask who they were anymore. He had guessed enough. And now he knew the past she ran from was catching up. "I'll hide you," he said. "Take you to the cave in the canyon ridge. It's old but safe." Kalia shook her head. "No," she said firmly. "We don't run anymore. You have." "Children," John said, "this isn't about pride." She looked at him with tired eyes. "It's not pride. It's survival. If they take me, they'll make an example. They'll use the kids to punish me." John's hands curled into fists. "Not while I'm breathing," he said, voice low and cold. He began gathering supplies rations, power cells, his old armor vest. Kalia helped without being asked, silently loading a backpack with emergency items. The kids didn't speak, but they watched with wide eyes. Sensing something big was about to happen, that night they didn't light a fire. They ate in the dark, waiting, listening to every sound. At midnight, a soft humming noise came from the sky. John stepped outside and looked up. A patrol ship hovered just above the trees, its searchlights sweeping the land. It stopped directly over the farm, then descended slowly. A shadow moved at the edge of the field hall, armored and holding a scanner. John raised his rifle, heart pounding. Rex stood beside him, teeth bared. The armored figure spoke into a device. "Target located. Initiate retrieval." John fired a warning shot near the soldier's feet. "She's under my protection," he said loudly. "Back off." The soldier paused, surprised by the human's boldness. "You're interfering." With noble law, the voice crackled from the helmet. John didn't care. "Your law doesn't apply here," he said. "Not in my home." More shadows moved behind the soldier. 3 others. Heavily armed, Kalia stepped onto the porch, her eyes burning with rage and fear. "Leave us," she said, voice sharp and clear. "You cast me out. You lost your claim." The lead soldier turned his helmet toward her. "Your survival was not authorized. You were property. Now you're a loose end." John didn't wait for more talk. He fired the next shot straight into the soldier's armor plate. The blast knocked the soldier backward, but the armor held. The others opened fire. Plasma bolts streaking across the farm. John ducked, rolled, and returned. Fire, his years of isolation hiding a trained hand. Kalia grabbed the children and ran for the root cellar. Pushing them inside, smoke filled the yard, and the sounds of gunfire echoed across the field. Then, silence. John stood over a body, weapon raised, his vest scorched, breath heavy. The patrol ship retreated, the remaining soldiers dragging their Injured comrade with them, they hadn't expected resistance, not from a human farmer. They would return, but not tonight. Inside the house, Kalia looked at him with wide eyes. "You could have been killed," she whispered. He wiped the sweat from his brow. "So could you." She stepped closer and placed a hand on his chest, her voice trembling. "They'll come back stronger." John looked out at the smoke. His farm broken, but still standing. "Then I'll be ready," he said. Kalia stood beside him. And for the first time, she didn't seem like someone needing rescue. She seemed like someone ready to fight beside him, not as a guest, but as family. The next morning, John stepped out into silence. The ground was still black from the night fire, and burn marks scarred the barn wall. He saw Kalia sitting quietly on the steps, her arms wrapped around the children. They didn't speak, but their eyes followed every sound, every movement. Rex paced nervously around the edge of the porch, ears alert, nose twitching. Later that day, John drove his old rover into the nearby village to gather supplies. He hadn't been there in weeks. And now, every glance felt heavy. People looked at him with narrowed eyes, some with confusion, others with something darker suspicion. Old man Harker, the store owner, leaned on the counter with crossed arms. "You bringing trouble to our valley, John?" T asked flatly. John kept his voice steady, "Just buying food." Harker raised a brow. Strange talk going around. He said, "Saw a patrol ship flying low last night. They don't show up unless something illegal's happening." John didn't reply. Just placed the credits on the counter and took his supplies, but behind him, whispers began. A woman stepped in, arms folded tight. "I heard he's sheltering an alien woman," she said, not bothering to whisper. "Some cast out noble, or worse, they say she's marked." Another added, "Marked and hunted." "She's got children too," the first woman said, "might be spies." John paused at the doorway, holding his bag of supplies. He turned slowly and looked at all of them, the same people he'd once helped fix roofs and fences. "She's not a threat," he said calmly. "She's a mother running from abuse." The room fell quiet, but the silence was sharp, not kind. Harker shook his head. "Even if you mean well, it won't matter when trouble comes back." Outside, two kids watched John load his rover and whispered to each other. "Is it true?" one asked. "He's married to her." "He'll bring war," the other said. "Humans aren't supposed to mix like that." John closed the rover door and drove away, but the words clung to him like smoke. The village had changed overnight, not in his favor, when he returned. Home Kalia met him at the gate. "You were gone too long," she said. Eyes searching his face, he nodded. "I'm fine. But things are different now." Kalia looked down. "They know about us." John didn't need to answer. The answer was written all over his face. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Kalia held the children close. "I should leave," she whispered. "I'm bringing danger to your life." John shook his head. "You're not leaving," he said firmly. "Let them talk, let them fear, but they're wrong about you." Kalia looked at him, her eyes filled with something between sorrow and admiration. "But if they come for you?" she asked quietly. John stared into the fire, watching the flames flicker and dance. "Then I'll remind them what it means to stand for something good," he said. Kalia leaned her head against his shoulder, saying nothing, but her silence felt like a promise, unspoken but real. Later that night, someone left a message outside the gate. A small piece of wood with red paint, 3 slashes, and a circle. John recognized it, an old colonist warning. It meant danger lives here. It meant you are no longer one of us. He burned the symbol without a word, but deep down, he knew it wasn't over. The next threat wouldn't come from the sky. It would come from neighbors, from people who once called him friend. It started just before sunset. The air felt wrong, like something heavy was about to fall. John had just finished repairing the east fence when Rex started barking. Not his usual bark, but deep, wild, and furious. John ran to the house, his heart pounding harder with each step. Kalia opened the door fast, pulling the children behind her. "They're here," she whispered, eyes wide with fear. He grabbed his rifle and peeked through the window. 3 rovers, headlights off, rolled in slow through the field, and behind them 5 men stepped out, armed. Local, familiar. These weren't soldiers, they were villagers. Men John once shared drinks with, fixed tools for, helped harvest. Now, they carried blasters and wore hard looks. Their leader, Marn, called out, "We don't want blood, John. Just the alien. She don't belong here, and neither do her kids." John stepped onto the porch, weapon in hand. "She's under my protection," he said, his voice calm but strong. "You all know me. And you know I don't give in to fear." Marn raised his gun halfway. "We're not your enemy. But you're making us one. Turn her over, or we take her ourselves." Kalia moved beside John, holding Fen and Lero close. "I'll go," she whispered. "Don't fight them for me." John shook his head slowly. "No one gets taken today." One of the men moved forward, fast, weapon raised. John fired without warning. The shot hit the ground inches from the man's feet. They all froze, eyes wide. "You take one more step, and I'll defend my home," John growled. Marn raised both hands, signaling the others to stop. "Don't be stupid, John. You're alone." John laughed bitterly. "I may be alone, but I'm not weak." The air crackled with tension, the kind that comes before real violence. But then a sound cut through the field, deep and humming. A drone, not small like before, but military grade. Hovering just above the treetops, its spotlight turned on, scanning the men in the field. A voice echoed from the speakers. "Back away. This is restricted land." The men panicked, some stumbling. Others yelling. Marn looked around in confusion. "Whose drone is that?" John didn't answer. He didn't need to, earlier that week. He had called in a favor, one from an old Earth ally who still owed him. The drone was armed. And its presence was no bluff. The villagers jumped into their rovers and retreated fast. Dust flying behind them, John lowered his rifle and let out a slow breath. Kalia ran to him and held him tight, her body shaking. "They would have taken me," she said softly. "They would have taken the children." John held her tighter. "But they didn't," he replied. "Because we fight back now." Lero and Fen peeked out from behind the door. Their eyes filled with both fear and pride. They had seen their human protector stand tall against enemies again. To them, he wasn't just a man anymore. He was a wall between them, and the dark Kalia looked up at him, tears in her glowing eyes. "You keep choosing us," she whispered, "even when it's dangerous." John nodded. "Because you're mine now, not as property, not as burden, but as family." She buried her face against his chest, and for the first time, she let herself cry. It wasn't sadness this time, but something close to relief. They had made a home out of nothing and defended it with everything. That night, John sat on the porch with his rifle across his lap, Rex beside him. Kalia asleep inside with the children. The stars above shone brighter than usual, as if watching over them. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But he knew one thing for sure: he wouldn't let anyone take them away. Not ever again. The farm was quiet again, but the quiet was different now. It wasn't fear or hiding, or the silence of waiting. It was peace, built from fire and defiance, a peace that had been earned, not given. John stood in the field, fixing a bent fence post, his shirt stained with sweat and dust. Behind him, the children played near the stream, their laughter dancing on the wind. Kalia watched from the porch, her arms crossed gently over her chest. She no longer looked like a broken woman. She stood taller now, her eyes steady, her heart steadier. This was no longer just John's home, it was theirs. That morning, a message came through the old comlink. The same colonist council that had once warned him was now requesting a meeting. They wanted to talk, to resolve things peacefully. John knew what it meant. They were scared. Scared because he hadn't backed down. He rode to the meeting alone, unarmed, but not weak. The council members sat stiffly at a table beneath the solar tower. They avoided his eyes at first, then spoke. Carefully, we understand you've made choices, one said. You've taken responsibility for outsiders. Said another. John didn't flinch. They're not outsiders anymore. He said, they live on this land, just like me. They've bled for it, cried for it, and earned it. The council tried to push rules, traditions, alliances. John shut them down with a single truth. They came to my door asking for help, he said. Voice calm but firm, and I gave it. If that makes me dangerous, then so be it. The council didn't argue after that. There was something. In his eyes, they couldn't match conviction. When John returned home, the children ran to him with cheers. Kalia waited on the porch, her face unreadable. He climbed the steps and stood before her, the afternoon sun casting long shadows. Around them, it's over, he said. They won't bother us again, she nodded slowly. Then did something she hadn't done before. She reached up, touched his face, and whispered, You changed everything. John shook his head. You're the one who survived the worst. I just opened the door. Kalia looked down for a moment, then took his hand. I want to say something. From my heart, John waited, silent as the wind moved softly through the leaves. I was abandoned, discarded, treated like dirt, she said. But you saw me as something more. You protected my children like they were your own. You faced guns, drones, and your own people just to keep us safe. She paused, her voice trembling, and even now, you say nothing in return. You just stay. John squeezed her hand gently, his voice quiet. I stayed because it was the right thing. Kalia's eyes shimmered in the sunlight. But I don't want you to stay only because it's right, she said softly. I want you to stay because you choose us. John looked at her, long and deep, and then smiled. I do, he said. Every single day, that evening, they shared dinner under the stars. No fire, no danger, no soldiers. No neighbors staring, just family. Rex lay at their feet. The children curled up beside them. Kalia rested her head on John's shoulder. Finally at peace, and as the stars glowed above them, far from politics, war, or judgment, one human and one abandoned alien woman found something no one expected, a home built not by law or blood but by choice, by love, trust, and a door that was never shut again.